Hello, welcome to another retro RHLSTP, back from 3 or 4 years ago. We're putting out the videos for free if you want to watch them on YouTube. It's better for us if you listen to the audio. Please support us if you can in any way. You can become a badger at gofasterstripe.com/badges from £3 a month, and that money will help us make more podcasts and more videos. So, this is a fantastic episode with Emma Dabiri. Really loved meeting her. Much too clever and intellectual to be on my podcast, but that's by the by. Do support us, richtown.com/RHLSTP if you want to see live dates in Sheffield, Chesham and Edinburgh. There'll be many more to come, I'm sure. And also Ballback stand-up, richtown.com/ballback/tour. Just 14 dates left. Maybe less than that now by the time you see this video. Anyway, sit back, relax, and enjoy this wonderful video with a wonderful, fantastic woman, Emma Dabiri.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Leicester Square Theatre. Please welcome a man who has got an idea that will revolutionise the game of association football. It's Richard Herring. Oh yeah, hello, Mary, hello. Lovely to see you. Should have killed me last year. Hello. Welcome to Richard Herring's Leicester Square Theatre podcast. Though I was hanging around with Darius from Popstars the other day. It's not even from the X Factor, he's from Popstars. He calls it RHLSTP. He's doing okay. He's doing all right. So, Darius, he's doing all right. I was watching football on the TV last night. I don't usually watch football, but I was watching the game. Quite good. The goalkeeper had a beard. Don't usually see that with the goalkeeper, right? And I thought, is there a rule that stops a goalkeeper growing a beard that's the size of the goal and then gelling it up so it's like solid hair? It's a hair wall. Can't be penetrated by a football. Don't think there is a rule that says that. So I am going to become a billionaire because I'm going to start up a football team. Mate, you're not even bothered with the other players. Only have to pay one person. I mean, we'll always draw 0-0, but that's... May have one other bloke. Not much else. We went to see Back to the Future, the musical. Yeah, you like it? No, it's great. It's just watch the film. Film's better though, isn't it? The film's better. Yeah. You know what I don't like about it? All the songs, isn't it? That's what ruins it for me. There's a bit that I went with my kids again, and I told a story about my son Matilda making the whole audience laugh. Go and listen to it if you haven't heard it yet. Can't remember what show it's in. But at the beginning, this one, quite early on, Doc Brown says the word crap, and my son turned to my wife and said, "What does crap mean?" It's again, he made everyone laugh again. He's been in the theatre twice. He's got more laughs than I have. Very good. It's all right. It's okay. If you like Back to the Future. Being changed a bit. And they're going to use up all my stand-up in this first episode. That's how it's not going to have any. I've been reading, with my daughter at night, I've been reading a book called Fantastically Great Women Who Made History. It's a nice thing to read with my daughter, although it turns out that nearly all the fantastically great women who made history are dead and died making history. But it's nice. It's nice to give us strong role models. I enjoyed... Sometimes I find out stuff I don't know, most of it, to be honest. Elizabeth Blackwell I'd never heard of, I don't think, who was the first woman to get a medical degree, possibly in America. Anyway, she didn't... I mean, she's dead now, but she didn't die in the story. She was an impressive story. But she finally, got into a university, off the top of my head, remembering in Geneva, somewhere like that. The only reason she was allowed into the university was because they asked all the men at the university if they would vote to allow a woman to study medicine with them. And they all just assumed it was a joke. Because that was so ridiculous. And so they voted yes as a joke. And she got in and was top of the class. That's the way to do it, girls. So it's good to have one of the women survived as an example. It's nice to have that. For your daughter, isn't it? Nice to say, look, you can do it. it's kind of embarrassing how awful history is to women when you're going through it with your daughter trying to inspire her. Anyway, my guest this week is probably best known for her appearance on the Antiques Roadshow. That's why we're here. She's mainly known for. Will you please welcome the amazing Emma Dabiri, ladies and gentlemen? Dabiri. Fuck, I did it. I did it wrong. After all that, Dabiri. I knew I knew. We were joking about it backstage about how I got her name right.
Yeah, I was so impressed because he said my name correctly, which is I'm just not even used to hearing the correct pronunciation. I was like, wow.
And then I said I prefer it my way,
yeah.
and then it was stuck in my way. Damn. How was the Antiques Roadshow for you? Do you remember being on the Antiques
fantastic,
Roadshow?
yeah, career highlight.
What did you do on the Antiques Roadshow?
I can't remember. You sprung that on me. What were we looking at? I actually can't remember.
Wow. If I was on the Antiques Roadshow, I'd remember all about it.
It was a good few years ago, to be fair.
That's all right.
And quite a lot has happened since then. So
did you have to tell the person what their object was worth?
No, I think we were just talking about its historical importance. There was something about a cabaret singer who'd been really big back in the day, but I can't remember what the object was. I'm sorry, this isn't a very good story.
No, it's very good. I like it when people are bamboozled by their own life. That's what I enjoy. Now, it's a kind of joke I do at the beginning. I pick on something obscure. It's all right. There's lots to talk to you about. I'm going to try and keep it light for a bit. For a little bit. What did I have that was light? Oh, it was the Antiques Roadshow. That was
That's your lot.
That was the lot. So look, let's talk about you. You grew up in Ireland. You weren't born in Ireland, but you grew up in Ireland.
No, I was born in Ireland. Yeah,
went away.
Yeah. I was born in Ireland, went away, came back,
right,
and was raised there.
Cool. So
Dublin City.
And that's as a half Nigerian, half Irish person. You'd sort of talked about how there weren't any other black people at all in Ireland, really, at that time.
Yeah. If I saw another black person, that would be something of an event.
Yeah.
It was unusual. It was like a 99.9% white country.
Yeah.
So just very little difference in any way, if someone even had a surname that wasn't an Irish surname, that stood out, So actually being black was a big deal.
And do you feel the Ireland's changed a lot, right, in the last few decades?
Yeah, it really has.
Whilst I think England especially has gone quite a long way in the other direction.
You could say.
Yeah. And so obviously it was not necessarily a pleasant experience, but do you feel that as a writer and an academic, do you feel having that sense of growing up somewhere where you were different than everyone else was a positive thing for you in some ways, if you ignore all the horrible racism that you get?
No, I think alterity. Oh God, I'm so tired. I cannot speak. This is gonna be a fun evening. I think being an outsider and kind of observing stuff maybe from the margins can give you an interesting perspective. Yeah. And I also just feel, I was having lunch with somebody else who was Irish today, who had left at a similar age to me and been in the UK for a similar amount of time. And we were both talking about how when we were growing up there, and hers was nothing to do with race, but I was saying, anything that was in any way different, it was a very, very socially conservative country until very recently. So anyone that was in any way different kind of was going to leave. We were talking about that, but we were talking about how, looking back, there are so many things that we're grateful for having grown up there. I think my perspective is very Irish, my worldview, my sense of humor. So with hindsight, I'm great. Yeah, I'm glad that I'm Irish Emma rather than American Emma, because I could have been if I'd stayed in the States. So I didn't necessarily think that at the time, but yeah, in hindsight, it was,
Because we had a comedian called Phil Wang on a few weeks ago, who's half Malaysian and half English. And he's written a book called Side Splitter, which is excellent, about sort of not feeling that feeling that you're both of those things, but neither of those things. Mm-hmm. So in Malaysia, he's too white, and in England, he's too Asian. and so he's sort of like an outsider, but also it gives you a perspective. I think as a comedian, especially, maybe more so, it gives you a sort of perspective on both the cultures.
Yeah, I think as a comedian, as a writer, I think there's a lot of professions actually where it gives you like a particular insight and perspective that can be rich.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you feel? Because it's interesting with. Obviously, if you're half of two things, do you feel the same as Phil? Do you feel like not Irish in Ireland? And
no, like to be honest, I wouldn't describe myself as half Irish or half Nigerian. I would say that I'm Irish and Nigerian. You know. I don't think that you have to. Yeah, I don't really buy into that whole like system of categorizing people, like, you know, into kind of like quotants like that. So I would say like I'm an Irish woman. Yeah, not half Irish. Or sometimes people will be like, "Oh my God, you're really like in touch with your Irish side," and I'm like, "What are you talking about? Like I'm Irish." You know, Irish people don't really say that. It's usually English people. They're like, "Oh yeah, you're really in touch with your Irish side." I'm like, "Yeah, because I'm Irish." So anyway.
But it's, you know, it has changed so much. I saw the documentary about, now I'm terrible with football, but the manager Charlton, was it the manager of Ireland, Jackie Charlton, who was a big fan of Paul McGrath, who's the
Paul McGrath.
Paul McGrath.
Yeah, we don't pronounce the TH.
Okay. Who was got everything wrong so far. Everything I wanted to say Paul McGrath as well. And I thought no, it's Paul McGrath in this. But I think. Do you think his story? Sort of, he had an awful childhood and had quite a lot of repercussions into his adult life. But the people of Ireland really took him to heart after the success of the Irish football team. Mm-hmm. And do you think that was a big turning point for Ireland?
No, I don't think Paul McGrath was a big turning point for Ireland. Actually, I'm a bit traumatized by Paul McGrath, because when I was growing up, they'd be like, "Is that your dad?" Like, that's my association with Paul McGrath, or being called Pauline McGrath. So yeah, I don't think he was the turning point. No. But I think like that's the thing that happens, you know, if somebody, it's changed now, because there is like a black and brown kind of like Irish identities emerging and communities and stuff in the way that there certainly wasn't in my time or in Mr. McGrath's. But I think when somebody, you know, had shown themselves to be like exceptional in the manner that he had, then there's like kind of a claiming. But I would imagine that when he was growing up, he was probably rejected, because I was always told, you know, you're not really Irish. So I would imagine it was similar for him.
Yeah. No. Okay. Well, look.
I really didn't expect us to be talking about
there'll be a lot of stuff you're not expecting. There'll be a lot of stuff you're not expecting. Believe me, it's going to go a long way from this. Grace. So your first book, which I have not read, but I've read about.
That's totally grand.
Because I ordered it from Amazon and it didn't turn up. And Miriam Margoli's book is about 4,000 pages long. So that was about people touching your hair, or not wanting people to touch your hair.
So the book isn't about people not touching my hair.
But that's what it...
But the title references that social phenomenon.
Sure.
But I guess it's kind of it's quite a, you know, straightforward, kind of simplistic title. The book is about it's about a lot more than just the phenomenon of unsolicited hair touching of black people. I mean, there's a chapter. So what I wanted to do was show there was starting to be this conversation about black hair kind of entering the mainstream in black communities and like black cultures. Hair is you know, something that just like a lot of creative energy is poured into, and hair is kind of like a big deal. But I think people outside wouldn't really know that. But that was starting to become kind of something that was entering into mainstream conversations. And then there was like a backlash against that, being like, oh my God, they're banging on about hair, like it's only hair, you know, it's not a big deal. So I wanted to write something that demonstrated why black hair matters, like why it is important. So just going into the kind of social history of black hair and ways in which, you can actually see a lot that is going on in terms of where we're at, in terms of kind of race relations and stuff based on people's hairstyles. You can see histories of like resistance and assimilation, and all of these politics are expressed through hair and the way hair is policed and the way hair is worn and stuff. So it's like a history book that goes from pre-colonial Africa through like slavery, the Harlem Renaissance, into today and the future, and kind of Afrofuturistic. So it's cyclical in time and all of that good stuff. So yeah, it's not just about hair.
No. Good. Because I've got Chinese hair.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I know.
I don't fully understand what that means,
Well,
but
I went to a Thai barber and he told me I had Asian hair.
Okay.
So
I mean, you have lovely hair.
Yeah. So I know a lot about what you're talking about. That's what mainly my life has been not much prejudice, but whenever my hair is seen, people are very prejudiced.
Really?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. So I know a lot you're talking about.
I'm sorry to hear that.
That's all right. But in that book, you talk about it is sort of interesting the way that Beyonce and Lauryn Hill are treated very differently, and one chose to westernize her hair and one chose to not westernize her hair. Is that?
Yeah. I mean, I don't think it's just the hair. I think like Lauryn Hill was somebody that had quite like her politics and her whole output was very different to Beyonce's. I think they're just very different artists. It's probably no coincidence that one of the ways that difference is expressed is through their hair. You know, Lauren having locks and Beyonce having that. But
then the attitudes of people towards those two artists as well. Did you think that Lauryn Hill seems more militant?
Yeah, absolutely. I think especially in those days, but I don't think she's seen as more militant because of her hair. But I think her militancy is also expressed through her choice of hairstyle, as opposed to, in contrast to Beyonce's.
This is the quote that I wanted to... This is what I was looking for earlier. Until the late 1990s, being black and Irish in Ireland was to almost unicorn standards, except everybody loves unicorns.
Yeah.
Very good quote. Thanks. And so the new book, which you wrote during lockdown...
Oh, yeah.
What White People Can Do Next.
Mm-hmm. It is a provocative title.
It is. Well, I wrote a book during lockdown...
To elicit such reactions.
I wrote a book in lockdown called The Problem with Men, and the same thing happens. Is that people read the title and decide... But that's a deliberate choice to make the title provocative so that people are then, hopefully, rather than going, oh, no, you can't tell me what to do next. I'm going to tell you that they'll read the book and find it.
Yeah. And there was a lot of that reaction.
Of
I had a lot of really irate people who are racialized as white message me and say, how dare you write a book telling me what to do? I'm not taking instructions from a black person. And
That's not like white people, is it? Very surprised.
But, within 3 or 4 pages, I have identified why it's actually like a really problematic title, and how I actually see, I'm not just talking about anti-racism, I'm actually trying to challenge the whole concept of race and looking at these generic categories like white and black and saying it is actually preposterous for me to write this missive to white people. Who am I addressing, So I'm kind of looking at the language and the framing of current anti-racist discourse and critiquing it.
Yeah. And it's interesting that white people...
Of a lot of it, not all of it, but yeah.
But, there's a lot... It's a short book, but there's a lot packed in there, and it's quite hard to unpack it all, I think. There's a lot of things...
Oh, no, I'm really sorry to hear that, because it's meant to be kind of like a crash course.
No, but it's good, because it makes you think a lot, but there's stuff that I've read it twice, so does that make up for not reading the first one? And I'm, there's still... But I'd not thought about the idea that I mean, for both white and black people, but to categorize white people and say you're all in a gang, and whether you're from Russia or Finland or wherever, you're all the you're all the same group. It's you wouldn't take that, for any other kind of. It is odd to be categorized as in white and black people.
And
as
black
well.
is the same.
It's
There's
exactly
huge diversity that exists amongst people who are racialized as black. You know, there's lots of different cultures, lots of different conditions and ideas. Yeah, it's just that huge diversity in these generic categories that were invented in the 17th century.
Yeah. So the book argues that it was in 1611 or something like that. The idea
1661.
Okay. That the idea of black and white was created.
Yeah.
Which, again, people are going to go, well, there were black and white people before then.
There weren't. That's what I say in the book. I'm just like, in the history of humankind, white people are babies. They've only existed since 1661, but so have black people, So obviously there have always been differences in complexion and hair texture and all of those things that we now understand as race, racialized difference. But the idea that those things had any intrinsic value didn't exist until the invention of the idea of a white race and a black race.
Yeah.
And it was created the first time we see so these concepts that we have of ourselves as white people or black people that are presented as, just the natural order of things, they're just consistent categories that happen to exist, are really relatively recent ways of us understanding ourselves and each other. And they were the concept of a white race as we understand it now was first introduced in the English colony of Barbados in 1661, codified into law through these slave codes. And the reason it was created at that time in that place is various things were going on. But one of the reasons was to enshrine this notion of superiority in the group who came to be known as white people, to justify the enslavement of the group who came to be known as black people, all of the kidnapped Africans that were in Barbados and in the Americas, whose labor the colonies were becoming increasingly reliant. The economies of the colonies were becoming increasingly reliant on. So to justify that kind of brutal system of exploitation, the idea of a white race that was innately superior and were the natural kind of lords and masters of this black race. And that's when blackness started to be associated with all of these negative characteristics and white people with all of these virtuous and positive ones. It was to justify that system. But another reason that it happened in that moment in Barbados was because, and I think this is really interesting, the Europeans that were in the colony had no sense of themselves as white people or having kind of a shared identity as white until the idea was introduced, and it really caught on. But there was everyone, in terms of Europeans that were there were indentured Irish, there were English landlords, Scottish landlords. There were all of these different classes of European people from different countries as well, who had no sense of a shared identity. These laws were introduced after there had been a number of uprisings where enslaved Africans and indentured Irish had come together to attack the English and Scottish landlords, who they saw as a common enemy. They're both exploiting our labor. And this was really threatening to the status quo, because there were more of those people if they all came together. Mm. And one of the things that the idea of whiteness did was to shut down those coalitions emerging between white workers, the people who came to be known as white workers, and enslaved Africans, because it introduced this kind of immutable difference between them and this notion of, the superiority of one and the inferiority of the other. So it was actually also to prevent these kind of cross-racial coalitions from emerging.
Sure. And that's stayed with us ever since, really. Weirdly enough, in my book as well, which does touch on All Lives Matter and Black Lives Matter and all that nonsense, that All Lives Matter bit, as well as the sexism and stuff. But it is the men who sort of, in my book's about the men who go, when's International Men's Day when there's an International Women's Day, and yet my conclusion was not exactly the same as yours, but in that actually the system is weighted against those guys, not because of women, but because of the ruling elite who are the ones who send them to war. And all men go, well, this is bad for men, this is bad for men, this is bad for men. And the reason those things are bad for men is because they're the people in charge.
Exactly.
And they've bought into that idea of men. And this is the same thing with buying into the idea of whiteness, feeling a superiority to other people and then feeling threatened by those people because you've been told to. Whereas the real enemy is the people with all the money.
Yeah. And people are distracted from identifying that because their focus is on the wrong people, you know, who they've been kind of conditioned and manipulated to see as their enemy, even though they might have a lot in common.
Yeah. So you're talking about the idea of a coalition of people understanding that and coming together rather than being sort of forced apart.
Well, I think in this moment when, you know, race is kind of so high on the agenda and there are so many conversations about racism and anti-racism, I think it's really important to have a familiarity with that history and to know that race was invented to justify racism and to enshrine this kind of hierarchy of races. I just think that is history that is kind of, crucial for us to know. And it's not very well known at all. Like most people are quite surprised when they're...
Absolutely, because I think in the UK especially, we're not taught that, which, you know, again, is why, when will it be White History Month? Is the same. It's the same thing. We're not taught the reason there's a Black History Month is because we don't know any of this stuff, and and increasingly we're sort of being told to, you know, be proud of the colony, you know, the British Empire and all this sort of stuff.
But the stuff I'm talking about is English history.
Yeah.
So I don't know why they choose not to teach that part.
I did history at university, and I didn't know. You know, looking back at it, I did a mod. Well, I didn't really do any work anyway, but that's irrelevant. I did something about slavery and emancipation in America. That was my special subject.
Outsourced.
Yeah. And I only did that because I couldn't speak any languages, so I had to do something in America, and that was what I was offered. But you know, so it's not something that was covered at all. You know, so it is interesting that the book seems you're saying, you know, there shouldn't be white guilt, and you don't like the idea of checking your privilege and all that sort of stuff. And yet it half seems that, and it half seems like you're really calling for the whole of society to be destroyed and start again. Don't you think? I mean,
I don't know if it's
there's that great there's the analogy you quote about a slave ship, and you've got the slaves chained up underneath, and the guys, the white guys above, taking the ship. And the answer isn't to let a few of the slaves up to be on the upper decks with the other guys. The answer is to get rid of the slave ship. Get rid of the ship,
yeah.
But isn't that what you're saying about society, therefore, if that's the...
Well, I mean, the beauty of art is interpretation. So, yeah, that's...
because if you know, you talk about capitalism, and capitalism has to change. But if capitalism changes, it's not just about saying, well, let's make it fair so that the best people get to have the money and everyone else does the work. Yeah, it has to be. Otherwise, it's just creating a different underclass of people. So presumably, you don't want that.
Yeah, exactly. And I feel like, you know, so in the book, I have a section that says it's called Interrogate Capitalism, and it's just looking at the kind of origins of the system of global capitalism that we live under now, and how its origins are at the same time that race is being invented in these English and European colonies, and how the system of that global financial system is intimately linked to the creation of race in that historical moment. And so the relationship, I say race and capitalism are siblings, you know. And then I also kind of link all of it to our current environmental crisis.
Yeah.
And it's that type of, that exploitation of human labor and the exploitation of the earth's resources and the pursuit, of just constant growth and profit has not only brought us to this crisis around race, but has also brought us to this moment of environmental crisis. And so those two things are also kind of like intimately intertwined. And the current system it's just not sustainable, by any calculation. So we can only continue as we are in this direction going in this direction for a finite amount of time, because literally like the earth can't sustain it.
Yeah.
But we just kind of ignore that.
So you're claiming, you're calling for the overthrow of our society.
No, because the chapter's not called overthrow. It's called interrogate capitalism.
Yeah.
It's just like think about these things.
Yeah, think about it and
the
then
way
overthrow it. I mean, I agree with it. I think but it does, it is absolutely, it's sort of, when you think about the damage done to the world by it's European people. So let's just call them all white people. We've fucked up the world, right? We create this awful situation. It's sort of, I mean, when you look, I mean, I hope people will be able to look back at our time and laugh at how ridiculous and awful it is. But you look back 300 years and you think, how did people like put people in slave ships and take them across an ocean? How did they morally do that? How were they able to live with themselves after doing that? And they were able to do it.
Yeah.
So they came up with some reason for doing that. The irony, I mean, you're talking about a lot of the slaves worked on tobacco places, and then they're making tobacco, which then killed all the white people smoking the tobacco. So it's like it's creating these awful situations for everyone, where everyone loses, and then they destroy the world.
And that's it in a nutshell.
Yeah, but that's what I feel with with my book, is that the feeling of these people propping up these systems that if they thought about it, the answer is to change society very quickly, surely.
Yeah, no, absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. And I think the emphasis needs to be on that rather than this current kind of almost fetishization of interpersonal privilege. Like the type of change that needs to happen with something of a degree of urgency is not going to happen on that interpersonal level. So all of the emphasis on check your privilege and all that is actually, I think, quite distracting,
Yeah.
I think our attention is in the wrong place. And in the book, like I say, you can't just jump to coalition. Like I think there needs to be like an honest. So one of the other I think one of the first chapters is like stop the denial. So I think there needs to be an understanding of the fact that when the idea of white people is invented, it is invented to enshrine this notion of inherent superiority. So we shouldn't be surprised when racist things happen. Race was invented to justify racism. So we need to have that as our starting point, and we need to understand that. But then we need to kind of move on from that. And I think rooting everything in this, as I said, this kind of interpersonal privilege level is not very strategic and won't bring about what needs to happen.
Well, it feels like check your privilege when you see that. It's more like you're not allowed to comment on this. It seems a way of shutting someone out of a conversation. As much as I understand why it's there, and I've had I think it's good for people to understand the way they're privileged if they're not looking at it that way. But just to say check your privilege is sort of a shutdown. You do talk about social media being sort of not helpful really in this. It's a way of saying something and not doing anything.
Yeah, so I think social media has been like really powerful and helpful in like the global response, that happened, that we saw after the murder of George Floyd, and all of the changes that seem to be subsequently happening. Like I think social media was really, really powerful in bringing us to that point. Like I don't think people would have paid as much attention if it hadn't been for the power of social media. But I just feel that when these conversations about race happen only on social media and people are getting all of their learning about it from social media, it tends to be quite reductive and polarizing. And these platforms are not just neutral platforms where people are just, kind of exchanging information, but they're spaces where, outrage and division is incentivized. So when you are having all these conversations about something like race happening in a landscape where division is incentivized, that is potentially like pretty disastrous. So I think social media can be like a powerful tool for bringing your attention to issues that creating kind of awareness of issues that people really might not have known about. But I think their understanding of those issues has to go beyond the information that they see or find on social media. People have to kind of read more further,
and just
more
be
deeply than
seen
that.
to say the right thing rather than act upon it. So there's always, but there's an element of that it's not just social media. In life, there is the kind of people who just want to say the right thing and
exactly.
never going to do anything.
So that's one of the things that I say about guilt. I'm saying guilt is not a generative emotion. I feel like guilt paralyzes people, but also if people are operating from a position where they're just trying to make themselves feel less guilty, and it's about them in that way, I think the actions that motivation, the actions that stem from that motivation, I think are just likely to be performative, piecemeal, and inadequate. But if you're motivated from knowing that you are also in certain ways oppressed or exploited by the system that we live under, and you're actually acting more out of self-interest rather than out of, I feel guilty and I need to kind of do something about that, or I need to not be called out or whatever, kind of fear of being called out. I think the action taken will be very different. So I don't think guilt is particularly helpful.
No. Now, I hope the book would just tell me what to do next. And there's a lot of work. You told me to read books and stuff. I wasn't expecting that.
I also encourage dancing.
Yeah, dancing as well. Here's a specific example, and what should I do in this situation? I live in a small village in Hertfordshire now, and there's a guy who walks his dogs who I just nod at every now and again. We say hello when we pass each other. And then I passed him one day, and he was wearing an All Lives Matter T-shirt. And,
Oh, God.
Should I say anything to? No, I didn't say, mate. Just Black Lives Matter means the same as that.
Yeah.
That's what Black Lives Matter. Not being clever. We live in a village where there are some black people. There aren't very many black people. There aren't many ethnic people, but there are some. And you're thinking, this guy's walking around with that T-shirt. Is it wrong for me to wimp out of I've mentioned on a podcast now, so he might listen to. Is it wrong for me to wimp out and not go, mate? I should go. Don't wear that around. It's embarrassing.
So if you just say to him, "Don't wear that," that's probably not going to be that effective, and he'll probably get really defensive, and he's almost probably it's quite provocative him wearing that.
It is.
So he probably almost wants somebody to say that, but maybe, and this is where I feel like you would have more energy to do this perhaps than a person who's racialized as black or some other racialized group, because when you're kind of having those confrontations regularly and it's literally about your life, that's weighted quite differently than it would be for you. So you should have the energy to have like a conversation, I feel, with him, just to kind of like probe. And I think in a dialogue, maybe you could be more effective in shifting his opinion than just saying you shouldn't be wearing that.
Yeah. I could give him a copy of my book, which is about that. But it's weird that that's where you feel like, so like I've written something, but I'm not prepared to, because it's exactly that. I feel you're right. I feel
but
if I said
you've written
anything,
something, you have all the resources to probably be quite convincing and compelling to him in conversation.
I think
you should try that.
I would just call him a prick, pretty prick.
And I mean, you're totally entitled to do that, and he probably is a prick, right? But like, I guess it just depends what outcomes we want, you know?
I mean, I think almost certainly he thinks he's doing. He thinks he's making a point of, hey, look, we should care about everyone. That's what he thinks. So in his head, he thinks he's being. I think he thinks he's being a bit of a prick, but he thinks he's making a good point.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Sad.
All right. If he wears it again, he's in trouble. Gonna have to. Can I ring you and get you to talk to him if I?
No. That's your job.
That is my job.
Hand him my book.
I'll hand him your book. I'll hand him my book. Let's get rid of some of my books. Got a big load of them in the back of my house. I need to get rid of them. All right, I'm going to ask you an emergency question. And it's, why are white people the best? No, it's not. It's,
Oh my God.
Let's see what comes up. Oh, these are by my daughter. My daughter wrote some of these.
Okay.
Would you rather be the floor or the sky? That's from my.
Definitely the sky.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's an easy one. Not like the questions you were asking me backstage. I was like, what?
This is another from my daughter. I haven't paid her for this. What would you rather find at the end of the universe? Candyland or Pink, Purple and Pinky Purple Land?
Pinky Purple Land.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Everything's pink or purple. But
In
mind you,
Candyland is everything candy.
Everything's made of sweets.
No, I can't deal with that. I'd have to go pink. Yeah, pink, purple.
Those are childish questions.
Is the next one going to be more sophisticated?
It is. Would you rather find a magical land by walking through the back of your wardrobe or by being caught up in a tornado?
Definitely the wardrobe option.
Yeah?
Yeah.
I watched The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe with my kids yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
stupid, isn't it?
It's a classic.
There's loads of talking animals in it and stuff. Doesn't make any sense.
ridiculous.
Didn't get to I didn't find out who wins in the end. It's a Christian allegory, you know?
Yeah. Aslan is God.
He's
Yeah.
Satan. He's
What?
Aslan is Satan. He just eats all the kids in the end.
The alternative ending.
If you get to the last book. So the guilt thing is quite interesting because there is, I do feel, like I was talking about reading this book about fantastic women with my daughter and just like, I feel, my daughter actually said what I said in the past, women weren't, people thought women shouldn't be educated. She went, what, so they didn't go to school? I said, yes, that's brilliant. You just stay at home. So I don't think she got the right. But it's sort of that. I feel embarrassed just reading that book about women, and I do feel like I just feel. Well, all the stuff that's happened with the Colston statue, which is from Bristol, near where I grew up, and people. Obviously, it's wrong to pull down statues without asking permission. But
Shocking.
So I feel very guilty about that. No, I feel it is amazing when you look at the history of Britain and the UK, how much of the society is built. Liverpool and Bristol built on
slippery
slavery.
with the blood of slaves.
And so, how do we make up? I mean, I know it's not our fault, but as you say in the book, it's how we act with that. How do you feel we should act in the modern day with the money that people are? I mean, there are rich people who I guess are still rich off of that money that was made in those.
Yeah. And often people who were powerful then, and their power was, kind of consolidated or certainly enhanced, through the slave trade. A lot of their descendants are still powerful today, Yeah. So I think at the most basic level, there just needs to be like a truthful reckoning, like with the history of Britain, Like I think that is like the most basic thing that needs to happen. And it's not about like people are like, oh, you can't make me feel guilty for and I'm just like, yeah, but you don't have to feel guilty for something that your ancestors did, but you have to take responsibility for what you do.
Yeah.
We've all been born into this system. We've all inherited this system and the architecture of race. These are decisions that were made like, centuries before we were born, but we don't have to just blindly continue to reproduce it. You know, we can actually make things. Oh my God, I should have turned my phone off. That's very unprofessional. I think it's my mum as well. She's kind of stalking me. Sorry, Mum. I think I just turned the ringer on. Shit. I'm a little delirious. I didn't have very much sleep last night. I've got young children, and
I understand. Yeah. We're both the same. We're both in a fantasy. This probably isn't happening.
We've gone through the back of the wardrobe.
We might have done.
So yeah, I think there just needs to be. I don't think like Britain has had an honest reckoning with the truth of, you know, empire and imperialism and the way that has shaped the identity and the culture of the country. And again, it's not about like, you know, haranguing people, but it's just about being honest about the history and how. And, you know, then people will be like, oh, but why are you banging on about something that happened like 200 years ago? And I'm like, well, because it completely shapes the present. Like, it's the reason why things are the way they are. It's the reason why we're having these conversations. So, yeah, there just needs to be that honest engagement.
And what do you feel? I know you're sort of saying in the book you don't think that it's helpful to talk about an end game, but are we ideally getting to a world where race is it just isn't a factor, or are we ideally getting to a world where, you know, everyone is appreciative of their own cultures? And
Yeah,
I mean, because and I did a routine about how, you know, in a way racists are more liberal than liberals because they see the world as four kinds of people. And some of them only see it as two kinds of people, so they're very close to seeing everyone is exactly the same. They just need to make one more step, whereas the rest of us is 195 different peoples, and we're a long way away. Yeah. But are we aiming for a world where race is just seen the same as hair color or eye color or height or whatever?
I mean, like, difference will always exist, and difference is like a beautiful and wonderful thing. You know, like the kind of diversity that exists in the world is phenomenal, and it's not about creating some sort of like homogenized, you know, standardized. Well, I mean, that is kind of what does happen, but yeah, that is not the aim. But when I think it's just important that we know that this architecture of race that we see as a foundational principle and the only way of viewing the world is just a relatively recent phenomenon. It's not something that just naturally occurs, just happens to be in nature. And it was invented to create and enshrine racism. Yeah. I don't know necessarily, like, I don't have a prescriptive that this is what we do when we know that. But I think if everybody really understood that, that would be at least, you know, a starting point. Yeah. You know?
Because it is true that people don't know. People go, oh, well, you know, it's in us innately that if people look different, they're not from our tribe and we must fight them. But everyone seems to get on with, except with ginger haired people. They all seem to get on with. They all seem to get on with, you know, those sort of differences.
Apparently, people with ginger hair actually have like really poor outcomes on lots of markers. Somebody was telling me that recently. Like they actually, I don't know.
Well, I mean, there's
studies on.
They deserve it though. That's the thing. So that's the difference. It's okay come on, we've got to be allowed to be racist towards one lot of people. It's just the if we move on to the gingers, will you come on us?
What does my book say? Stop the false equivalencies. Come on, we know gingers aren't a race. Not racially. No, what was I? No, there was something I wanted to say and now I've forgotten. But yeah, I think we at least need to know about the fictitious nature of race. And it's not to say that racism doesn't exist, because then some people try and take it to that conclusion. Yeah. Racism is real and present, but race was created to create it. And actually that's what I was thinking. You know, when people are like, oh, well, racism, it's just human nature. There's been racism for millennia. Yeah. That is objectively untrue. Like that's just not true. There's always been prejudice, you know, but it actually being racism is really, really a new, in the kind of scope of human history, it's a new phenomenon.
Right. And I mean, in some ways, the United Kingdom seems better about this than when I was a kid. Right, and I was as racist as, not as anyone, I wasn't as racist as Hitler. I was as racist, I was racist as a kid. I would think, just because, I mean, you talk about it in your book, but there were nursery rhymes with the N-word in them that we were taught. So you were taught certain things. The TV shows of the 1970s was all, what if a black fella moves in next door to you? That was the sort of main joke. And do you feel that England? I mean, it's mainly England I'm talking about, because I think the rest of the United Kingdom has done a lot better. No, maybe not Northern Ireland, but do you feel we've progressed? Because that sort of stuff wouldn't be on TV anymore, and kids growing up wouldn't be just innately taught to be racist, and would that? I mean, some would, but not to that degree.
Yeah, no, I think there has definitely been change, and that kind of like explicit racism is not as present in the way that it was that you're describing. But racism is actually like quite sophisticated, and like it morphs and it adapts. So even though there's not necessarily that level of explicit stuff, I don't think that means that doesn't mean that we've kind of like solved the problem and that it's gone away. But certainly there has been change. Yeah. But I quote James Baldwin quite a lot in the book because I'm a big fan of his writing. And even though he's writing in the 1950s and the 1960s, I just think he's, even for now, his writing seems, kind of streets ahead of lots of other like more contemporary voices. But he's talking about, he says all European people have, there's a deadly temptation to feel an innate superiority. So there's a, do you want to elaborate? So there's a deadly temptation to feel an innate superiority. And I think that is something that, just has to be like engaged with, But whiteness was created to create that sense of an innate superiority, So that's there in the DNA of the racial classification and the racial category.
And I sort of felt like racists would die out. The racists are old, so therefore racism would die with old people. But that doesn't seem to be happening.
No, I don't think there's any. I don't think there's any evidence to suggest that. I think that sometimes I feel this generation, this division of people in terms of generation is actually again maybe like a bit misleading. And I don't even know if it's like empirically correct. But I think there's lots of older people who probably like aren't really racist, and lots of younger people who probably are really racist. I don't think it's necessarily determined by your generation.
No,
it might show up differently. The way you the racism might show up differently based on your generation, but I don't think it's fully determined just by your age.
No, and I sort of feel sorry for in a way, I feel sorry for those guys. And I write about them in my book, the guys who were sort of furiously protecting the statue of Winston Churchill and sort of got so confused they were punching each other and the police because nobody had turned up to... And they're so angry, they're so angry, and yet all of their problems come from within, from them not knowing who their real enemy is.
Yeah. If only their anger could be more effectively directed, in some way that might bring them some sense of peace and like fulfillment.
Yeah, but is that sort of feeling of? I mean, it's sort of been proven wrong, hasn't it? Because they've sent home everybody who came to the country to work for us, and they've discovered nobody in England wants to take those jobs.
Yeah.
So there weren't people coming over and taking their jobs. Do you think they'll accept? But I think it's very hard to change minds, because it's very hard to change people's minds when they've got that committed to their point of view, to that degree that they won't even listen to an argument. So they're the guys you have to convince for sexism, for racism. Those guys, and it's those particular guys in Trafalgar Square. They're both sexist and racist and angry with themselves and want to punch someone because they're lost. They are. I understand. I get it. They feel lost and they feel emasculated by their own definition of what a man is. They feel like the world's changing, and they need as much help as anyone, really.
Sometimes I think I don't actually know, I'm not familiar with this group of men, sadly.
I think you are. I think you are.
But no, this particular particular incident, I have a kind of vague awareness of it. But I think that there are kind of like fringe extremists that it's not even really about them. Like there's people that it probably would just be completely like wasted energy and effort, like they're too far gone. But I would imagine that those people are more, are a minority. And I think there's a lot of other people who are more like, who could be more easily persuaded in certain ways, but they actually become alienated and then are more susceptible to going that way, But I think it's about kind of persuasive arguments. Yeah. And I think there are people I think there's a kind of mass of people that are kind of probably more open to being easily persuaded.
I think so. I mean, I'm a sort of hopeful, but I don't know why. I don't know why. It feels like the world hasn't got much of a chance because of the environment and stuff. But I'm sort of hopeful that things will... It just feels like, when you look back at Victorian times, people go, they put kids up chimneys and they do this. What a load of idiots. And no one then... It's the same thing I was talking about. You're not prepared to turn that focus onto yourself and think, imagine what... I just hope in 100 years' time that people would look back and go, why the hell did people have this big issue about just, the colour of someone's skin? It's absolutely insane.
Yeah, but even like our reliance on things like coltan, in our phones, in all of the devices that we are so like addicted to and so reliant on. Like I actually think, when people are like, I never would have used like slave produced products. And I'm like you totally would have if it was normalized, because you'll use you'll use these minerals that are mined by children in like horrific conditions and not really think twice about it, or wear clothes that are like, made by sweatshop laborers. So yeah, most people probably will go along with like appalling things if they're normalized, and they'll just kind of compartmentalize it and justify it to themselves in some way.
Yes, that's sad, isn't it? What are you going to do next, Emma?
Well, I'm not a white person, so I don't need to do anything.
Can I tell? I don't think I should be able to tell you. No, because you're finishing. This is your PhD as well, right? This
isn't my PhD. This was just like a little cute side project in lockdown.
Yeah.
I'm actually in the final year of my PhD.
Yeah.
So I'm just gonna finish that off.
And then do you want to move? I mean, you're a fantastic writer and thinker.
Thank you. Thank you.
Are you going to? Is it irritating that I've just talked to you for an hour about your book? To be fair, you started it, it annoys me that I have to have this a conversation with you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Whereas if you were a white author, I would talk to you about other stuff. Are you keen to write about other stuff? Or
100%. Like I intend to write more, and the next book that I'm planning will not be non-fiction. It will be fiction.
Okay.
It won't have race as like kind of... I often feel like I didn't want to write anything on allyship. I didn't even really want to contribute to the allyship conversation. I felt like provoked by everything that I was seeing, by what was happening around me. And I was like, no, there needs to be an intervention. Like I actually felt like a duty of service to write that. But yeah, there are many, many other things that interest me and that I would like to be, thinking and writing about as well.
And Antiques Roadshow, would you go back?
Of course.
But you're as well as being a great writer, you're an extremely glamorous person. So I'm sure TV is knocking down your door to... I mean, if you're not watching the video of this, the outfit is absolutely phenomenal. So I'm sure that there's that's a pot. Do you miss the days when academics were really disgustingly ugly? And do you miss those days? I miss those days.
I don't know that we live in a time where academics are like renowned for their glamour.
The ones you're allowed to see are all good looking now. They hide away. That's what your next book should be about.
Okay.
Bring out the ugly academics again. Get them out. Let them on the telly again. You used to watch Open University, and it just used to be. People who were barely like human. I mean, if they weren't speaking, you would think they were a different species.
Someone like Stuart Hall seemed quite suave and sophisticated. Well, I don't know. Yeah.
Well, there's, that's the only bad thing about you is you're too glamorous.
Well, do you know what? The coat, I didn't plan on wearing the coat on stage. I'm just having first of all, I was a little bit cold. When I was backstage, I was like, oh, it's actually fucking freezing. So I was like, let me keep my coat on. I didn't realize it'd be so hot out here. But also I was having something of a wardrobe malfunction. So I was like, for the sake of decency, I'll keep the coat on. But now I'm actually quite uncomfortable and kind of sweating.
What animal died for that green fur you're wearing?
Oh my God, it's faux fur. No animals were harmed in the making of this coat.
No, I'm joking. Look, it's been really lovely to meet you.
Likewise.
I'm an awkward guy, am I? But, I do the awkward thing at the beginning and then suddenly I get all perceptive, don't I, in the middle? I wish it was deliberate. I lull them into a false sense of security and then I got it. That's my review. I'm just preempting the YouTube reviews of this. Which look forward to that. They don't. Guys who go on YouTube don't like women or people who aren't white. That's what I've noticed. So I've noticed that. But I just delete your comments, guys, if you put them so, and block you. Look, I will look forward to whatever's coming next. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
For coming on, ladies and gentlemen, Emma Dabiri.
You got it right. Yes.
You have been listening to RHLSTP with me, Richard Herring, and my guest, Emma Dabiri. Thank you to Scant Regard for playing the music on these titles. I am indebted to my producer, Ben Walker. I am also indebted to Chris Evans, not that one, and everyone at Go Faster Stripe. Thank you to everyone at the Leicester Square Theatre for looking after us so brilliantly. Thank you to Ben Walker for eating a big sandwich during these credits. This is a Sky Potato Fuzz and GoFasterStripe.com production. Head to GoFasterStripe.com/badges. Become a monthly badger. You'll help us make more podcasts and you'll get loads and loads of lovely extras, including a badge and a membership pack and a secret code and backstage interviews that you can't see anywhere else. See you soon.